Hi everybody, this is Debbie from the Inspiration Station. Today I'm joining the Cut File Craze YouTube hop, and I'll be working with a file from Gwen at Cut to You. The link to her shop is listed below. In today's layout, I'll be documenting photos from a trip my friend and I took to a local orchard last fall. In order to create this apple basket, I decided to try an inlay technique instead of backing the cut file like I normally would. So I cut a background out of white cardstock and cut the basket outline from a dark brown and adhered it to the background piece. I used my Xyron for the outline, and the one thing I don't like about using the Xyron is all the extra glue that ends up in all the openings. No matter how hard I try, I just can't get that completely clean. I used Simple Stories Color Vibe cardstock in cinnamon and brick for the apples and a pattern paper from Photoplay for the leaves. I used the contour feature on my Cricut so that I could cut out just the pieces that I needed. I wasn't sure which red I would use for the apples, so I ended up cutting them out of both. I decided to ink the edges of the pieces with distress ink to give them a little more definition, and then I started putting the pieces into the openings of the file, sort of like a puzzle. The apples were very easy to get into place, but when I got to the leaves, I realized I should have left them on the cutting mat so that they would be in their proper place when I tried to put them back. Instead, I had something more like a jigsaw puzzle. I'm pretty good at jigsaw puzzles, but a couple of these pieces were so similar that they were a bit challenging. I did manage to get them all in, but I'll spare you watching the entire process. One of the things that I noticed with the darker pieces was that if I didn't have them placed properly, a little bit of the white background showed through. In retrospect, I probably should have done the background in the same brown I used for the outline so that it wouldn't be noticeable. But since I had already gone this far, I wasn't going to redo it. Instead, I decided to take out my Copic markers and color the edges of the open spaces so that it wasn't quite as white and didn't show through as much. Once I got to filling in the basket, I decided to leave the pieces on the mat so that I knew exactly where they went. But this meant that I needed to ink each piece separately, which was a little messy. I used a variety of adhesives while putting this together. For some of the smaller spaces, I used liquid glue, and in the larger spaces, I did use my tape runner. This is the paper pack that I picked from. It's from Photoplay. It's called Autumn Orchard, and I really liked this diagonal plaid. I thought it went really well with the colors that I chose for the apple basket. So I'm going to mat it onto 2 layers of cardstock that I've gutted. I have printed 9 photos onto a 5x7 photo collage in my Epson PictureMate print software, and I matted them with the same cinnamon cardstock that I used for the darker apples. I used scraps that I had left over from cutting out the apples and leaves to make a couple of tags, and I chose this cut-apart card from the collection to use as my title. I wanted to put it behind the basket and cover up the word pumpkin because we didn't pick any pumpkins that day, but I also wanted to have the apples below the word harvest show. Here, I'm just going to stick down the background paper. I did cut 1 inch off of 2 sides to make it a 10x10 square, and I'll take a minute to stick it down to the cardstock mats. I took a little bit of time moving things around and trying to get the placement where I wanted it. I needed to make sure that I had enough room for everything after cutting down that plaid paper to fit. I taped the cut-apart card to the back of the apple basket, and I'm going to put the tags on the back as well, so that I can move everything around as one unit. But obviously those tags were way too long, so I cut them down thinking I might be able to use the scraps that I cut off on another part of the page. While I'm sticking everything down, I'd like to remind you that this is a YouTube hop and a number of talented creators are joining in this month. There's a playlist in the description box below of everyone who's playing along. Please go and check them out and see what everyone else has created. I'm sure you'll find some inspiration from their projects. So now that I know where everything is going to go on the page, I'm going to glue down the unit of the basket and tags. I have the leaves on the right going off the page slightly. I like the way that looks, and I think it gives a little more interest to the page when things go outside the box. I tried to use the extra pieces that I cut off the first tags to bring some color up to this section of the page, but they were just not big enough, so I ended up getting paper that was left over and cutting new tags. I'm using this very old punch from Stampin' Up! To create the tags, and I'm going to put them up here in the upper left to bring color from the basket up in that direction. I really like the way everything's looking, but I think it needs a little more pattern on the page, so I grabbed the 1-inch piece that I cut off the diagonal plaid to use the stripe on the opposite side. I first thought I could use the dark brown wood grain pattern from the collection to border it, but felt it was just too dark. So I grabbed a piece of brown cardstock that matched the outline of the cut file instead. It was a scrap, so not quite 12 inches in length, but I was going to cut it to go under the basket anyway, so it worked out fine. I like the way that the stripe grounds the design of this page. Now that I've done with that, I'm going to go up to this corner and attach the tags that I cut to the back of my photo collage once I get them arranged in a way that I like. And then I will stick the entire collage down onto the page. Whenever I use tags on a page, I like to put something into the holes to kind of finish them off. So I pulled out some of my twine and ribbon and tried to choose something that I thought looked good. And I ended up choosing this mustard sort of color that was from Tim Holtz. Once I decided on the twine I would use, I decided I also needed some reinforcements on the tags. So I used 2 circle punches to make them. One is 1/8 of an inch, that's the green one, and the orange one I believe is a 1/2 inch. So I started by punching the 1/8 inch circle first, and then I lined the 1/2 inch punch up over the top of that, and it made just the perfect size reinforcement for these tags. It just took me a minute or two to get some glue on them and put them down on the tag. Then I can add the twine on. Then I went to my dies and found this old Sizzix tab die that says date, and I'm going to use the L Studio tiny date stamps to put October 2025. I thought that bringing that ivory color that was on the back of the cut apart tag over to that corner would form a visual triangle once I added my journaling. I did my journaling on strips and added some foam tape to the back. I'll put those over here in the upper right hand side and just make a few adjustments before I finish. Then I went into my collection of enamel dots, found a couple of different shades of red, and I'll use those as finishing touches on the page. That just about does it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to visit the other ladies participating in this monthly hop listed below. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I will put some still photos at the end, and I hope to see you back in the next video. Have a great day.